Hey Maya. Ah, I'm putting in the pin intimacy with. Oh my gosh, I can't spell. Pin. Oh, it didn't go. Hey.
Hey, good to see you. Our
Ew, I'm
last
fresh
week.
braids.
Yes, oh yeah, thank you. I'm
You look
ready
good.
for my I'm taking a vacation tomorrow, so I got a new
Okay.
hairstyle.
I just got back. That's why my braids are old.
Where are you getting back from?
I just went to Virginia Beach.
Nice, nice. I'm from Virginia originally.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's really nice down there. I liked it.
Yeah.
I have my featuring my kid today. I was trying to get her to go to sleep. It was not working out in my favor.
It is
So,
what it is. That's okay.
hey dad, my dad's in there in here.
Oh, hey.
Yeah, so this is our last week. We had a little break. Um Last week we had a little break. So today is our last discussion all about sex with a hint of jazz and intimacy with Maya. Thank you so much for being a part of this, and having these conversations are so important. Is there anything that you wanted to share before we get into?
No, I think I'm ready to just dive straight in.
All
As
right.
people know who I am in general at this point, so we can just dive into the conversation.
Yes. So, healthy sex and sexuality. We're going to talk about lube, masturbation, and having a healthy sex life, no matter what number of sexual partners you have, or whatever. If you don't have any partners and do have partners, whatever you are doing, you can have a healthy sex life doing it.
Sounds good.
All right. So first, let's talk about lube. Breaking those stigmatizations. So lube is not does not mean that you have a dry private parts.
Yes, no, it doesn't mean that at all. And so, one thing that I want to talk about is the process of self lubrication. So what is typically referred to as getting wet. And so, pretty much, if someone is not self lubricating, chances are that they're not aroused. So, this is not the case in all scenarios, and I'm going to unpack these other scenarios. But I think that this is something that I want to flag, especially for people who are having sex in heterosexual encounters between a cis man and cis woman.
Mhm.
Sometimes there's this notion there's something wrong with the woman in the encounter for not self lubricating. But in fact, what that can signal at times is that the woman, is not actually aroused
Right.
or into the sex that's happening. And so that can be a nice signal to take a pause and to try to stimulate her better, be a little bit more creative with regards to the type of sex that you're having and all of that, exploring different types of ways of connecting sexually. But the point is, sometimes if someone is not self lubricating, that means that they're not aroused. Now, I don't want to stop the conversation there because there are a lot of exceptions to this rule. One of which is that sometimes people are aroused, but for whatever reason, they're not self lubricating. And this can happen with people who have penises as well, where they won't become erect even though they are aroused. So in that scenario, it's really great to just have lube ready to go, right? Because just because the person's not self lubricating doesn't necessarily mean that they don't want to continue on. So that's
Right.
one scenario. And then the other scenario is just because someone's self lubricating doesn't necessarily mean that they want the sexual encounter that they're having. And so
Right.
that's really important to say as well. Words trump what the body does. At the end of the day, that is the
Yeah.
number one thing. Expressing consent verbally. So if someone says they don't want something, regardless of how their body is reacting to being touched and not like on their genitals, the most important thing is talking about consent. So I just want to flag these different scenarios to say that self lubrication is not the only way to determine if someone with a vulva is aroused. And I would encourage people who use that as their only tell all to explore other ways to notice this. So you can notice this through how the person's breathing, through how they're moving, through how their face looks, how they sound. There's all of these different ways that also can communicate that someone is aroused. So I just wanted to talk about this. But as it pertains to lube, the moral of the story is just have it there, have it right there on the nightstand. So no matter which of these scenarios ends up happening, it's right there ready to be used. And
Right.
lube can also be a lot of fun because there's different lubes that have different stimulating properties or different types of temperature properties. So it can also just be fun to use. So
Yeah.
there's really no reason not to be using
Not
it. It
to.
can
Yeah.
only make sex better.
Right. So I know my lube experience was that when I got pregnant, like your body chemistry changes. And
Mm-hmm.
so sex was harder for me when I was pregnant. And so like we started using lube, and at first I was like, "Oh my gosh, like all the stuff that they say about it, the stigmas that come with it, but like in reality, it made sex more enjoyable, you know?
Right. And
And
at the end of it, no, please
I
finish.
was going to say it didn't mean, I couldn't control what my body, I'm having a kid, my body chemistry had changed. I couldn't control, what my body responded to, or how my body responded to certain things.
Exactly, exactly. And I'm really glad that you brought up some of the meanings that we layer over top of this because they're totally unnecessary. People's bodies don't just operate one way all the time.
Right.
And I do believe that, if you're having sex, the main thing is for it to be pleasurable and fun. So,
Right.
who cares what precisely is happening, how much self lubrication you're doing or not? The point is to have a good time. So if
Right.
lube can help with that, then that is great. And then also, I mean, of course, there are people who are having sex to get pregnant, and that's another scenario. But even so, what we're talking about in terms of pleasure and comfort doesn't necessarily have to go away. So
Right.
yeah, I'm definitely a big advocate for that.
Yes. Which can segue into lube is also used for masturbation.
Mhm.
And just some background on that. They don't. So like media wise, like you always see about masturbation for people with penises and how that works and stuff like that. But like they
Mhm.
don't really. Um, it's kind of taboo to talk about masturbation and female pleasure and just like how important it is. How masturbation is important for maintaining a healthy sex life.
Mhm. Yeah, so there's so much that we can unpack with this. So I guess first I'll start with this stigma for females, and then also talking about like masturbation in relationships. So there is definitely a stigma for females engaging in self-touch, self-pleasure, masturbation, etc. Um, and there's a whole bunch of theories as to why this is, and I read some of this stuff in grad school, and has to do with patriarchal norms around sexuality, and women are not supposed to be sexual people outside of contact with other men and things like that. So there's a lot of different reasons for this, and I just mentioned one of the many reasons so that people have the tools to understand like this is not how it needs to be. There is nothing inherently or naturally wrong with female self pleasure and things like that. And there's a lot of theories that will contextualize that for you. But I also do want to talk about like self pleasure in the context of relationships as well, because sometimes there's this notion that once you enter a relationship, like self touch and masturbation just completely has to go away. And in fact, like if someone's engaging in that, that must mean that their partner is doing something wrong. And that might be the case for some people. I don't want to negate those experiences. But I do see self pleasure and having sex with other people as two different experiences.
Right.
So self pleasure is an entirely about you. It's a selfish experience. It's all about your body, exploring your body, being curious about yourself, and bringing pleasure to yourself and no one else. So that is one very, useful experience. But then having sex with other people is about connection, right? Vulnerability, and all of these other things that are really great to have in your life too. So I do just want to talk about how having sex with other people and having sex with yourself are not just supposed to be different versions of the same thing, but they actually can be different experiences and different ways of experiencing your body.
Right. Which brings us to segue into, oh, well, first my anecdote every time
Yes.
with some facts.
Yes, please. I was
um,
waiting for it.
I learned about masturbation by reading a book. It was some girl named Alice. She was like in 7th grade, and I think I might have been in 8th or 9th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And Alice just taught me all these things. Like she was going through her puberty stages in the book. It was a kid's chapter book, kind of maybe
Hmm.
preteen. She was doing that, and I was reading the book, and she was talking about stuff, and that was how like I learned, which leads into why we have these conversations, because I was learning reading books out the school library versus a sex education class talking about why masturbation shouldn't be taboo.
Right. And I mean, that's pretty much everyone's experience. Like, no one really learns about self pleasure during sex ed in school, which is
Yeah.
really unfortunate. And I do want to just briefly talk about like some ways to approach self pleasure, especially if you're a cis woman or someone with a vulva. So, we talked about how there's this stigma and shame around it. And so, part of getting in touch and having that kind of experience with yourself is going to be doing some of the work to actively try to unlearn some of that stigma that's placed onto you and reclaiming your body and your right to provide it with pleasure. So that's one
My
element of it. I'm
sorry,
sorry.
my baby. She's
Oh, no
like
worries. I didn't
grabbing
even.
at me. I was
Oh,
like,
yeah, I didn't even
okay.
hear her. But
Oh.
yeah, just reclaiming your body in that way. And then the other component of it is that I think the number one thing that masturbation needs to have is a curiosity towards yourself, how
Right.
you feel, how you respond to things, what you respond to, what you think about, and all of these things. Just approaching yourself, your mind, and your body with a sense of curiosity is the number one thing that's going to help you through your self pleasure journey. And sometimes there's this notion that, oh, you must be doing masturbation wrong if you're not doing it like the people in porn, or because you like to lay on your stomach when you masturbate or do certain types of things. There's no way to do it wrong as long as you are being curious about yourself and exploring your body. And of course, not harming yourself or other people. But beyond that, it's all about just being curious about yourself. Seems like your daughter wants to get in on the conversation.
Yeah. Oh, Corey, give me 5 more minutes. Okay, sorry.
No worries.
So yes, which segues into multiple sex partners, which talk, we could talk about slut shaming and just the stigmatization between girls having to save themselves versus men have to go, boys will be boys when it comes to sex and sexuality for, our experiences as people of color and Black people.
Yeah, yeah. So there's definitely a ton to unpack there. And there definitely is a difference in terms of the messaging that people of different genders get when it comes to having multiple sexual partners at once. And so I think that especially for people who are kind of bearing the brunt of this stigma, so cis women, queer people, etc., I think it's really important to think about two questions. One, do you have the capacity to have multiple sexual partners? And two, do you genuinely desire having multiple sexual partners? So the thing is, there is nothing wrong with having multiple sexual partners. And there are people who go on to have multiple sexual partners for the duration of their life, and it's something that is
Mm-hmm.
really enriching for them. But there are also people who have multiple sexual partners and they're doing it for some sort of validation from other people, to hear people or be around people who think they're attractive and all of these things. And that can also ultimately be harmful because you're not doing the inner work to explore and accept yourself outside of what you can bring to a sexual encounter. So that's why I think that these questions of do I have the capacity right now to have multiple sexual partners, and do I have the capacity now to maintain multiple sexual partners and still be in a healthy mental state is an
Right.
important question. But also, do I want to do that? Is this something that is enhancing my life in any way beyond the affirmation that it's just bringing me? So those are the two questions I encourage people to think about, whether you're someone who doesn't have multiple sexual partners and you're interested in perhaps exploring that, or if you are someone who has multiple sexual partners and you're trying to explore if it's something that's really serving you. Hopefully those two questions can help.
Yes. Which will my segue into in my small drop, I wrote my child. I'm so sorry.
Don't worry about it. It happens. I've watched other lives where there's babies.
Yes. But I wrote my book, and that was like my experience of going through, like, why am I having sex? What about sex makes me happy?
Right, right,
Where does my pleasure come from in these experiences? And it's so important for me because I wanted to know, like where does that happiness lie for me,
right.
which I learned through masturbation.
Yes.
So,
And see,
you
and that
know,
goes back to what we talked about last time, right?
yeah. So it's very, I think, like, it is very important. Like, a healthy sexual relationship with yourself leads to a healthy sexual relationship with others, with one partner, or, whatever your desires are when you're dating and or seeking out relationships and stuff like that.
Yes, and I think that that's especially the case for people who are socialized as girls or as women because so often our kind of like go-to disposition is to serve other people and to center their pleasure in their experiences, and that comes through in sex, which is why we have issues with fake orgasms and things like that. So I do agree with you that masturbation can really help girls and women reclaim a sense of ownership over their own pleasure and know how to bring it to sexual encounters with other people.
Definitely. Um, I think that's everything.
Yeah, I think what I want to end this conversation with, and also just this series overall, is just briefly talking about like we've talked extensively about safe sex, right? Which I
Mhm.
defined as the prevention of the transmission of STIs and STDs, but also the prevention of unwanted pregnancy. And so we've talked a lot about safe sex. And today we were talking more so about like healthy sex.
Mhm.
So I do believe that healthy sex goes beyond just having safe sex, beyond just using condoms and things like that. The healthy sex is trying to have an experience of oneness between your mental and emotional state and what your body is experiencing. And so
Right.
that's why self pleasure and destigmatizing things around lube and multiple sexual partners is really important to these conversations. And I do believe that if we have a strong enough relationship to ourselves, and we know what pleasure feels like, and we believe we deserve pleasure, then that helps us do things like have safe sex with other people and like having sex with other people that is pleasurable. So I really do think that, I encourage people to think about what is healthy sex for me? What is pleasurable sex for me? Just like you were saying, you went through just some time ago, because the conversation should not and cannot stop just at safe sex. It has to go beyond that, for each of us to cultivate our own unique relationships to our own sexualities.
Yes. And I think that is a beautiful and wonderful note to end on. You want to plug yourself, tell us about your article,
Yes, yeah.
and
So,
where and how to find you.
yeah, so my Instagram page is at Intimacy with Maya. And so I post weekly content on there about intimacy, relationships, all kinds of things. And I do so from a personal perspective, a Black feminist perspective, a sociological perspective, and all of that different kinds of things. And then I also recently wrote an article called A Love Letter to Black Women Dating, that is talking about the impact that stereotypes have on Black women as we try to make authentic connections with other people. So definitely check that out. That's the link in my bio.
Yes, and Maya, thanks again. This has been a great month with you and working with you. I'm glad that we were able to make this connection and produce this content and get it out there. And I'm forever grateful for that and working with you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really grateful for these conversations too. I think
Yes,
I've grown
thank
a
you.
lot from them.
Make sure you guys follow at Intimacy with Maya. She has a lot of great educational and informative content for everybody.
Hmm. All right. Thanks so much again.
Thank you.
Bye.
You guys have healthy sex lives.
Yes.
Bye.